Listen, about the president's statement on the necessity to produce 8 million drones per year. These are just words. But really, that's the goal.
Look, drones are not weapons. Drones are ammunition. Weapons are a complex system. This is a complex that includes a control station for pilots, a repeater if needed, and so on. Drones should be regarded as munitions. That is, just like how many shells are needed, how many bullets are needed. That's how we should treat drones. And when we talk about 8 million, I think that in the context of a world war, which we are moving towards, and the latest article written by the commander of Azov about how we are already in a world war, we just haven't defined it for ourselves. I think that the usage will be there for 10 million and 20 million drones.
What is the current situation in Ukraine? What is the trend? At what stage are we now?
Ukraine is a world leader.
We are just starting, after all. I mean, you know, parity. Can we protect the sky from Shaheds?
I think so. We see that every such airwave from Russia is perceived apocalyptically in Ukraine. How many times have we heard that next month the Russians will knock out our energy? At least 4 times. At least 4 times. This has not happened even once. Every effective action by the enemy initially causes fear. And if we project this into the future, we think, okay, if they advance like this, it will be a disaster. But then we adapt, and it doesn't happen. In fact, the opposite also works. That is, remember the successful counteroffensive operation in Kharkiv. Now there, in 3 months of such an offensive, we will liberate the entire territory of Ukraine. Unfortunately, the enemy also adapts. That is, the initial successes, when the enemy finds some gaps in our defense, they cause fear that it will continue like this. But it never continues, because counteractions begin. And this effect, it disappears, fortunately.
I still want to go back a little, recall your, so to speak, past, Russian and so on. Basically, as I understand it, you were in a Russian-speaking environment in Germany, one way or another, right? No.
Well, initially I worked in Germany in media.
How did you not become imbued with the ideas of this Russian world and so on? Because many immigrants are still oriented either towards the Soviet Union or towards Russia, and so on, and so on.
So I had the opposite path. I mean, look, I'm from the year 1980, and my family suffered a lot from all these Soviet repressions. They imprisoned my great-grandfather, my grandfather, and so on and so on. And they trained them in such a way that by the time I was a child, they were already fully integrated with this whole BTG. I grew up with the understanding that this is not a better country, that everyone around is an enemy and so on. And for me, on the contrary, it was a journey. That is, for me, it was a journey when I moved to Germany. I began to look at Russia from the outside. For me, it was a path to understanding that this is a criminal system, not just the mistake of one dictator. You know, like in Germany, they say you just need to replace Putin. No, this is a criminal system that brings to power people who meet its internal needs. And that Russia needs to be divided into normal states, and without this, nothing will happen. Well, so to speak, I always say that as soon as Ukraine became independent, Ukraine did not start any wars. And the same needs to be done with modern Russia. It is an entirely artificial imperial criminal product. And as soon as they collapse, we will see democratic states, non-democratic states, successful, unsuccessful. Which of the former states occupied by Moscow, there were 14 of them, started imperial wars? No one.
Do you know exactly what weapons were purchased with this money? With the money you collected?
Well, look, we are buying drones.
Actually, it's about drones. You initially started purchasing drones.
Look, we initially started purchasing power stations, and this was our first action when the bombing happened in October 22. and we bought a power station. But with the next collection, we bought tactical medical supplies and Mavic drones. And very quickly, already in the year 23, those units we worked with told us they needed FPV. And we started by buying FPV and then producing them.
And in general, it devolved into your own production.
Yes, well, because we realized that keeping the technology in our own hands is much easier, because we don't have to explain to the manufacturer what is needed.